if you combine that with the pro-business and the pro-American agenda of the red wave, it's pretty clear that this administration wants to grow business in America. It wants to deregulate. It wants to strip away handcuffs. It wants to lower taxes. It wants to accelerate progress and then the passage to the future in the United States. And all of that, I think, is just very auspicious for Bitcoin and the digital assets industry.
Hey guys, welcome to Everyday Finance. According to MicroStrategy Executive Chairman Michael Saylor, Bitcoin is unique among commodities because it is genuinely designed for the future. Saylor contends that traditional assets like gold and oil are fundamentally flawed because their supply grows in tandem with rising demand, even though investors still rely on them. Production increases in response to rising prices. More gold is extracted, more oil wells are drilled, which eventually pushes prices back down and reduces long-term value. He makes the point that even gold, which is frequently regarded as a trustworthy store of value, has not been able to maintain wealth over time. Oversupply and financial instability were brought on by events such as the gold rush, and as technology develops, the same pattern applies to all tangible commodities, increasing supply, decreasing scarcity, and declining value. But this cycle is broken by Bitcoin. Only 21 million Bitcoins will ever be produced, regardless of how much demand there is or how far technology advances. This is because its supply is code-fixed. Because of this, it is particularly impervious to inflation and supply shocks that devalue other assets. According to Saylor, Bitcoin is a radically different kind of commodity that is made to retain its value and resist the economic forces that erode everything else. It is not just another asset. Watch the video ahead.
Well, I think what we clearly heard from Donald Trump is never sell your Bitcoin. Big question was, does the United States sell Bitcoin? Does the United States buy Bitcoin? If you recall, the German government sold a lot of Bitcoin at $55,000 a Bitcoin. It turns out to be a more than $1 billion mistake in a couple of weeks. Big mistake. And people used to speculate, well, you know, is the government going to dump the Bitcoin? Are they not? And now what you see is Trump is pro-Bitcoin. And with the red sweep, that means the Republicans run the Senate, control the Senate, and they control the House, which means the pro-Bitcoin senators, like Senator Lummis, have now moved from being in the minority to being in the majority. In the minority, you watch the laws being written. In the majority, you write the laws, you pass the laws. Before November 5th, there was actually broad consensus in the House and the Senate to repeal SAB 121. And they did. And the president vetoed it. So what I would expect is that SAB 121 will be either withdrawn by the SEC or it will be repealed, and the president will support the repeal. That opens the way for banks to custody Bitcoin. That opens the way for the entire banking system to embrace Bitcoin. And I think for Bitcoin to grow by a factor of 100x from here, we need for the banking system of the world to support Bitcoin. So if I think about the consequences for Bitcoin, I think what this means is it's an acceleration of pro-Bitcoin regulations. I think that we'll see in-kind creation and redemption of Bitcoin ETFs. I think we'll see the repeal of SAB 121. I think we'll see support for Bitcoin within the banking system from the banking regulators, from Treasury, from OCC, from SEC. I think you'll see more supportive legislation from Congress. I think it will be approved by the White House. I think that this is a signal to accelerate institutional adoption. I think that the previous administration had been hostile to Bitcoin mining, hostile to Bitcoin banking, hostile to the Bitcoin ETFs. And the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, followed by the shutdown, I mean, effectively the forcible liquidation of Silvergate and Signature, even though those were solvent banks. I mean, they were perfectly healthy banks that were actually forced into receivership by a hostile administration. I think that had caused the banking establishment, reasonably enough, to be skittish and to be conservative and a little bit slow to adopt Bitcoin, because they could see there was resistance in the administration. I think that now, with a new administration, with President Trump coming to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville and saying, I will end the war on crypto, I will end the war on Bitcoin, I will support Bitcoin, we will not sell our Bitcoin, we're going to make Bitcoin in America. America is going to be the capital of Bitcoin, right? The fact that he said that, I think that sets the tone at the top. That means I think, number one, it seems inconceivable to me that a head of the Treasury or the CFTC or the SEC will be appointed that is anti-Bitcoin or anti-crypto, right? That seems quite obvious. We know that Trump is all in on crypto, all in on Bitcoin. So I think that we'll have favorable, supportive cabinet members. I think the second thing is we know we'll have a supportive Congress. Congress was already in favor of Bitcoin, before November 5th. We'll have a supportive Senate. The Republican senators were already in favor of Bitcoin. The Democratic senators have been sidelined and won't have any power in this regard. So Elizabeth Warren's agenda is going to become largely a thing of the past and irrelevant in the White House, in the Senate, and the Congress of the future. So I think that all of this suggests an acceleration of institutional adoption. It's a signal that it's okay for insurance companies to think about insuring Bitcoin companies. It's a signal that it's okay for banks to bank Bitcoin and crypto companies. It's a signal that it's okay for Wall Street to start to embrace, endorse, and advocate Bitcoin, right? It's a signal that the president and the administration is going to look at things like Operation Choke Point as hostile to the interest of the industry. I think if you combine that with the pro-business and the pro-American agenda of the red wave, it's pretty clear that this administration wants to grow business in America. It wants to deregulate. It wants to strip away handcuffs. It wants to lower taxes. It wants to accelerate progress and then the passage to the future in the United States. And all of that, I think, is just very auspicious for Bitcoin and the digital assets industry.
The fact that Bitcoin wasn't developed by a government, business, or financial institution defies logic. It was created by an unidentified person, distributed without charge, and, in spite of everything, it was successful. Bitcoin is doing something that no other asset has ever done more than 10 years later. Bitcoin is weightless, borderless, and travels at the speed of light, in contrast to tangible commodities like gold or oil. Bitcoin can be sent instantly, frictionlessly, and without waiting on banks or borders, but you can't send gold over the internet or move oil across continents in milliseconds. It is not dependent on physical extraction or logistics, nor does it deteriorate with time. The ramifications are profound. Bitcoin is a digital commodity that settles instantly, travels around the world, and, most importantly, does not inflate. Fiat currencies reduce purchasing power while inflation pressures, even at 2% annually, continue to affect gold and oil. Bitcoin is immune due to its fixed supply. By design, there is no inflation. Bitcoin is sometimes referred to as digital gold, but even that term may be underestimating it. Digital versions of physical systems have historically outperformed their analog counterparts by an exponential margin. Bitcoin is already worth trillions of dollars if it is only digital gold. However, the benefits are far greater if it's more, if it's the framework for a new financial system. The majority of people still don't comprehend Bitcoin in spite of this. They are still doubtful, they haven't studied it, and they don't own it. However, people who take the time to learn more about it are starting to see that Bitcoin is a new kind of money that is as open and scalable as the internet itself, not just a fad or a technological advancement. It's still early, too. Watch more.
You know, with a supportive House, a supportive Senate, and a supportive White House, I think something will happen. The only question is to what extent, right? Will it be the Lummis bill? Will it be max? Will it be double max? Will it be a Trump max strategy? Now, the logic of the bill and the logic of the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is simple. Buy the future, right? Once upon a time, the British looked to the New World and they realized the future was the New World. They came to the New World. It actually was the New World that powered the British Empire. That's why they won the Napoleonic Wars. That's why they were the greatest empire of the 17th, the 18th, the 19th century. They were fueled by the power of the New World, just like the Spanish Empire was fueled by the gold of the New World. Eventually, the 13 colonies realized they needed to go west, and as they expanded west, the United States grew into a formidable power. With the Louisiana Purchase, we doubled the landmass of the United States. Without the Louisiana Purchase, there would be no St. Louis, no place for you to get married. And that was a pretty good purchase. We did well there. That was Napoleon selling Louisiana to fund a war that he lost, and the U.S. doubling in size. What happened next was the acquisition of Texas, Nevada, the Western Territories, and California. Also going west again, it turned out to be a good trade. Made America, it created Hollywood. It created Silicon Valley, right? It gave America Apple and Google and Facebook and Amazon and movies and music and the Eagles and LA, and made us the cultural capital of the world. And the Mexicans were not the cultural capital of the world. And I'm sure they would like to have kept it, but they didn't. And then we acquired Alaska from the Russians. And it turned out that there were trillions of dollars of minerals and energy underneath Alaska. And that is manifest destiny. So nations grow by expanding into territories where they can generate extreme prosperity and productivity. And now there's nowhere further west to expand. The new frontier is cyberspace. You can't go west, you need to go up. You need to go into cyberspace. And Bitcoin is cyberspace. And the logic of the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is, why don't we buy the future? Why don't we buy 20%, X%, anywhere from 5 to 25% of the future? And if the United States acquires 20% of cyberspace, then all of the capital from the past, from the 20th century, from the 19th century, the gold of the 19th century, the real estate, the bonds, the stocks of the 20th century, they're going to flow into the 21st century. That's the money that's going from traditional money to Bitcoin. And all of the capital from China and Russia and Africa and South America and Europe, it's going to flow into cyberspace. It's going to flow into Bitcoin. So the geopolitical logic of the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, which kind of understates it, it makes it sound like we're just buying it in case we need it. It's really the Strategic Bitcoin expansion, right? We're putting a flag in cyberspace where all the money in the world is about to head. And the logic is, we might as well get there before the rest of the world decides they need to settle in the Manhattan of cyberspace. If we do that, it makes us rich. The Lummis bill is worth $16 trillion to the United States in its current form. If they up that, it could be worth double or triple or quadruple that much. We can address the national debt, reduce the national debt, retire the entire national debt. That's obviously a good idea. Getting rich is obviously a good idea. Retiring the national debt with other people's money is a good idea. And of course, if you're a neocon, the best idea would be to retire the national debt with your enemy's money, right? So this is there's a kind of a thing of beauty here. If the enemies of the United States see all their capital flow into cyberspace where we own it. And so one part of the pie is buy the future. The other part of the pie, or the other idea, is attract all the capital from the rest of the world into cyberspace, floating above the United States. You know, and the third idea is, should anybody ever decide that they want to recapitalize their company or their country on something other than U.S. Treasury bills? And by the way, the Russians own Treasury bills. The Chinese use United States sovereign debt. Our enemies used our sovereign Treasury bills or our sovereign debt. Our friends use it. Everyone uses it. If anybody ever decides they don't want to capitalize on that and they want to go to the next thing, they're not going to go back to gold. They're not going to go to silver. They're not going to go to glass beads or bales of tobacco or seashells. They're not going to be able to capitalize on their own fiat currencies because every other currency is weaker than the dollar. They're going to have to go to something stronger, faster, smarter. They're going to have to go to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the future world reserve capital network.
The concept of perfect money remained unattainable for centuries. Although gold was trustworthy, tangible, and scarce, it was not perfect. It eventually failed under the strain of contemporary economic systems, grew in size over time, and was challenging to transport. Without today's technological tools, no one could invent a better form of currency. Then Bitcoin appeared. Bitcoin was not produced by a corporation or issued by a state, in contrast to all previous forms of money. It was created by combining three technologies that were simply non-existent until recently: cryptography, computing power, and global connectivity. Its strength also comes from its consistency. Bitcoin doesn't degrade, it doesn't inflate, and it doesn't yield to central planning or politics. It simply is. The US government has now confirmed what many people already thought. Bitcoin is digital gold. It's a valid reserve asset, not just a new concept. Michael Saylor asserts that this type of acknowledgement cannot be reversed. It's the start of a long-term change, not just a temporary phase. According to Saylor, the future is either or. Bitcoin will continue to grow. It's going to be 1 million if it survives, which he thinks it will. Because value compounds rather than simply persists once something is acknowledged as a superior form of currency. Bitcoin might be the first to get it right in the grand scheme of things. Thanks for watching.